want to say thank you to Miss Davis this morning for letting me come in and work with you guys. We're going to try something. And I don't know how it's going to go, but we're going to try it. So I know that you guys are pros at listening and learning. And so this morning, we've got an organizer that we're going to use to do our listening and learning. And we're familiar with focus questions, right? Yeah. Okay, so I want you to look at the paper that I gave you. I decided to change our focus question a little bit, and I want you to put your finger on this first word. You didn't get one? All right, great job. Buchanan's got his finger there. So the first word says, I'm going to read it, and I want you to follow along. The first word says, describe the life cycle of a tree and how a tree is helpful to other trees when it dies. So I want you to pick up your pencil. We're going to circle the important parts of that question so that we know exactly what to put when we get to our bottom to answer our focus question. So I want you to underline the word describe. Because when I describe something, it tells more than just one thing, right? If I describe a little girl and I say that she's young, she has brown hair, that's telling multiple things. So we're going to describe the life cycle of a tree, and that's what we need to be listening for as we're doing listening and learn today. We've got to describe what the life cycle is, and we've got to describe how a tree is helpful, not to people, not to cars or anything else, but how it's helpful to other trees when it what?
When it dies.
When it dies. Because that sounds crazy, right? You would think that something that dies is not helpful. But what we're going to learn today about trees is we're going to learn that they are helpful when they die to other trees. All right, so now that we've got that, let's switch over to our first picture. Maybe not. Is that HDMI? Is that computer? There we go. So there are certain things on Earth that make life possible. We need water to live, just as we need the air that we breathe. Have you ever thought about where the air that you breathe comes from? The air that you breathe is totally dependent on or supported by the existence of trees. Without trees, humans could not live on Earth. There are thousands of different kinds of trees in the world. There are towering sequoias, and there are tiny dwarf willows. There are noble oak trees and scented pines, and they all make life possible on this planet. So if I'm thinking back about my focus question that talked about the life cycle of a tree, have we heard anything yet about a life cycle?
Yeah.
What have we heard?
Unless it's on the planet.
It says that they're on the planet. Anything else about a life cycle that sounds really important? Because I really didn't hear anything that talked about the stages that a tree goes through. So let's keep reading. Trees provide us with many things and perform tasks that you might not even be aware of. For example, trees provide us with oxygen to breathe. Trees also take in carbon dioxide through their leaves. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, meaning that if too much of it builds up in the Earth's atmosphere, our planet will heat up. Therefore, the trees help to manage Earth's climate and keep it livable for us. Tree roots help to fight soil erosion and flooding by holding the soil together and absorbing water from the soil. Finally, we use trees, or the wood that comes from trees, all over the world for all kinds of things. Can you think of 3 things that the wood from trees is used for? Who can tell us one thing that the wood of trees is used for? What's one?
Build like a shed.
Do what?
To build like a shed.
To build a shed to keep my lawnmower in. What's another one, Dylan?
So you can breathe.
So you can breathe. That's what the trees are for, but what can we make out of the wood? That's what they're asking us. What can we make out of the wood, Bo?
Fire.
We can use fire, the wood to make a fire. What else, Clay?
Build a house.
Build a house. All right, so great. We've got 3 things that the wood could be used for. So let's go on to our next one where we're going to talk about the parts of a tree. So let's review the different parts of a tree. We've got the main stem. The main stem of a tree is called the trunk. Tree leaves grow on branches. All the branches out of the tree grow out of that trunk. The roots hold the tree in the ground, and they help to feed the tree too. The roots absorb the water and the nutrients from the ground. The water and the nutrients travel up the roots, through the trunk, and out into the branches. Do you know why leaves are such an important part of a tree? Because leaves are important because they enable the tree to produce food. Another important part of the tree is the outside layer called the bark. The bark protects the tree from outside forces such as heat, cold, insects, and bacteria. So we've got all the parts of the tree that they're showing us. What I didn't hear me say from our reading, and I still haven't heard about this life cycle, about how the tree starts out and then grows up. Trees follow the same life cycle as other plants. Ooh, did you hear the word life cycle?
Yes.
So I think we're getting ready to learn about that. Just like that of a flower, a tree's life cycle begins with a seed. Oh, goodness. I just heard that a tree's life cycle begins as a what?
Seed.
And my focus question for today is asking me about the tree's life cycle. So I tell you what we're going to do. Let's stop right here for just a second. Let's go back to our organizer. If I can get there. Just keep pressing the buttons.
Yeah, I do. When in need.
There we go. All right, so I'm going to reread to you what I just said. I said that just like a flower, a tree's life cycle begins with a seed. Is that important to describing its life cycle?
Yes.
So let's go to our first box. And what we're going to do in our first box is we're not going to write in complete sentences, right? Because we're going to turn them into sentences at the end. We just need to write down the important parts of what we heard. And we heard that it begins as a what?
Seed.
A seed. So let's go here and let's put trees, and you should be writing with me. Trees start out as seeds. And I'm going to put a little line right here. I used to teach my boys and girls to write in bullets. When we write a bullet, we're just writing a short little fact. We're not really writing a whole sentence because we're going to turn it into a sentence later. So I put this little mark right here beside it to remind me that it's not a complete sentence yet. Now, while you're getting that down, I'm going to keep reading. Tree seeds can be as large as tennis balls or as tiny as freckles. They come in various shapes and sizes too. They can be flat, smooth, bumpy, long, or thin. Tree seeds have 3 main parts. They are the embryo or egg, the stored food inside the egg, which enables the seed to grow and change, and the seed coat, which eventually falls off. So if I'm going back to my thinking, I have the first part of the life cycle. The first part of the tree's life cycle is that the tree starts out as a seed. We just learned about that there can be big seeds, little seeds, flat seeds, round seeds. We learned about the parts of a seed. But the main thing I learned from reading that was that the tree's life cycle starts out as a seed. I'm gonna figure it out one day.
I'm telling you, it's easy.
Is it
I
easier
used
to
to do
do
it that
that?
way. It's easier with this one because you have, one button or this button. This
Okay.
goes to that,
Thank you,
or
Miss
that,
Davis.
and then this goes to that.
All right, let's go back to the photo. And I'm gonna try, learning on the spot. All right, we got a big word. The word is germination. Can you say germination?
Germination.
Germination is when a seed begins to grow. Oh man, Dylan, did you hear that? Germination is when what? Okay, hold on, let me see what else they tell me. Germination is a seed when a seed begins to grow or sprout. Certain conditions are required for germination to happen. We have learned that in the temperate parts of the world, the seasons affect the life cycle of living things, especially plants. Therefore, when there is enough warmth and direct sunlight, as well as water from the rain, the seed splits open and the germination begins. This usually occurs in spring when there is sufficient warmth and rain. So when there's enough warmth and rain. So we just talked about the second part, didn't we? We talked about the second part and what it does. So what do you think we should put here as our most important thing that we learned about the second part of the tree life cycle? What do you think?
Maybe germination is when the tree, the seed cracks.
Is that Hannah?
Avery.
Avery? Is that Avery? Everybody say great job, Avery.
Great job,
Great
Avery.
job. All right, so let's go with it. That is great, Avery. I love your thinking. So I'm gonna write the word germination because it's a big word. G-E-R-M-I-N-ation. A-T-I-O-N. So she said that germination is when the seed cracks open and begins to what? What's it beginning to do? It's beginning to grow. Thank you, Aubrey. All right, I'm gonna pause right here because we just wrote a long fact. But what you will notice, boys and girls, is so far, we've got the first two steps of a tree's life cycle. Because if we go back to our question, what we're focusing on is being able to describe the life cycle of a tree. We've got step number 1, and we've got step number 2. Step number 1, which we said that we started out as a seed. Step number 2 is when that germination comes in. And when we germinate, the seed cracks open and it begins to grow. Now what I also remember is they told me that it cracks open and begins to grow when it gets enough water and enough sunlight. But I don't really think that's important in the life cycle. We're just talking about what are the steps. I actually saw on the internet where some people will take a paper towel and they'll put the seeds in a paper towel and they'll spray it with water. And what's happening is they're starting that germination process. And then when their seed starts to sprout, then they'll do the next step that we're getting ready to find out. I sure will. Dr. Richmond is getting decent, just decent, at using one of these. Because the first time he ever really used one was in Miss McClure's class a couple weeks ago. And he didn't realize that he could move the card around and the way that it turned, and he's getting decent. He's hitting on powder. He's taking practice.
When Miss Norma was out, you teach my brother's class.
I did teach your brother's class. All right, so I think most of us have got that there. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna switch back, and then when we come back to this, if you were missing something, you can get it, okay? Thank you, Ms. Davis. Once germination begins, the seed produces roots that search for groundwater. What do the roots search for? As they find water, the roots hold fast in the ground and a stem grows up towards the sunlight. Tiny seed leaves open and use the sun and water to make food. The seed has become a seedling or a young plant. So a young plant like you guys is called a seedling. What's it called?
Seedling.
Seedlings need just the right amount of water, just the right amount of warmth, and sunshine to grow. What is warmth? What is warmth, Reed?
Sun.
Well, they get the warmth from the sun, but what is it? Warmth makes you feel hot or warm or cozy. It makes you feel cozy. They need the right amount of heat, okay? And they get that from
The sun.
the sunshine. With the right conditions, seedlings develop into young trees with roots, a trunk, branches, and leaves. Young trees are called saplings. Hold on. I just heard another step. Did y'all hear that? Hold on. I gotta make sure. Let me read it again. The text told me that with the right conditions, seedlings develop into young trees with roots, a trunk, branches, and leaves. Young trees are called saplings. Who can put that into words for me? What is the next step? Think about it. What is the next step? What did we just read that was the next step? Let me read it again, because I need somebody to tell me. You ready? With the right conditions, the seedlings develop into young trees with roots, a trunk, branches, and leaves. Young trees are called saplings. So what is our next step? I got 2 hands. Anybody else? Anybody else heard me? Got 3 hands. Let's come up here. What is it, Bo? What's the next step?
The next step is a seedling.
Close.
A
Not
sapling.
a sapling. So it becomes a sapling. All right, so let's go to our third box. And we're going to put the tree turns into a sapling. And we said the sapling is basically a word for what? A young
Tree.
A young tree. It's basically the word for a young tree, a sapling. So what we're going to do again is while you're sitting here writing, Dr. Richards is going to remind you of what we're thinking. We got to think about our thinking. We're trying to find and describe the life cycle of this tree. We found that step number 1, the tree starts out as a seed. Step number 2 is our germination process, where that seed starts looking for that water, starts looking for that warmth. And once it gets it, and it gets enough of it, it turns into a what, everybody? And a sapling is nothing more than a small tree, a young tree. I think of it like a baby tree. We had a tomato plant at my house, and when my daughter would go out and try and pick the tomatoes, and they were still green, I would say to her that the tomato is still baking, it's still cooking, it wasn't ready to be picked. Same thing here. It can't start growing until it's a sapling, okay? It's got to go through its process. So I'm kind of thinking, this is now a young tree, right? You know what I'm going to do? Let's add something. I'm gonna put a parentheses. That's what a parentheses looks like. That's the first part of parentheses. And I'm gonna put young tree. I'll put my other parentheses. Because in my head right now, here's what I'm thinking. The only thing left for that tree to do is what? Is grow, because we just got all the parts of the cycle. Where it started, what happened next, and now it's a young tree. We just got all the parts of the cycle. Now the question is, are we done? Because if I go back to my question, we've still got to find out how it's helpful to other trees when it dies. So we're not done just quite yet. All right, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to take it down, and then we'll come back. Miss Davis, I can do this in other rooms now.
See?
There are two types of trees, deciduous and evergreen. Deciduous trees shed their leaves. Now this is a picture of our sapling, right? Looks real young, real small. Let's go to a picture of our deciduous and evergreen. Deciduous trees shed their leaves. Deciduous trees tend to have wide, flat leaves, whereas evergreen trees tend to be narrow and thin like needles. You know what? I can make a connection to this because this is the type of tree I see all year round. This is the type of tree that when it gets cold and the wind starts blowing, then it loses its leaves, right? You got something you want to add, Bo?
The evergreen is the Christmas tree.
It's like a Christmas tree. During the cold winter months, deciduous trees, this one right here, sheds their leaves and become inactive for the winter, much like hibernating animals do during the wintertime. In fact, this is what keeps them alive during the coldest part of the year. To prepare for this time of rest, deciduous trees stop using their leaves to make food, and instead, they shed their leaves. Then during the cold winter months, they save energy until spring returns, and in the spring, they will use their energy to produce new leaves. So, you know what I just heard? We just read about deciduous trees. Did it tell me anything about how a tree helps another tree when it dies? No, it didn't tell me anything about that. Let's go to our next section. Evergreen trees, on the other hand, which Bo told us were like Christmas trees, shed and reproduce their leaves throughout the year. So there is always green leaves on evergreen trees all year long. The cones on evergreens are like flowers. Now, unlike deciduous trees, evergreen trees do not shed all of their leaves at the end of the fall. Instead, they use their leaves to make food all winter. Did I hear anything about what happens when a tree dies? Huh? No. Mm-mm.
I said yes.
You said yes. How long does it take for a tree to grow to full size? Well, it depends on a number of things. Different kinds of trees grow at different speeds. In tropical parts of the world where there is constant sunshine and rainfall, a tree can reach maturity or become an adult in 30 years. In cold regions of the world, it can take 100 years or more. So now we're going to talk about tree destruction. Ooh, I just heard destruction. The length of a tree's life depends on many things. It will always depend on the tree having enough sunshine and water, but other factors can affect its growth and lifespan too. The condition of the soil, which the tree is growing, diseases such as insects, infestations, and bacteria can alter the natural lifespan of a tree. Accidents such as fire and natural disasters such as hurricanes and floods can have an effect too. Also, people cut down trees so they can be used to make a variety of products. Now, I heard them say about trees ending its life. But what I didn't hear was how that helps other trees. Does that sound correct? Okay. When a tree lives for a long time and then dies, it is not totally the end of its journey. Ooh, darn it. When a tree lives for a long time and then dies, it's not the end of its journey. Decomposers like earthworms, bacteria, and fungi take over the dead tree. Through the decomposition, say that word?
Decomposition.
Say it again.
Decomposition.
Through the decomposition process, they help to slowly break down the tree into a rich nutrient that feeds the soil and enables new tree seeds to grow. Think about that, because I'm going to ask somebody I have not heard from today. I just heard what a tree does to help other trees when it dies. I'm going to read it one more time. Through decomposition, they help to slowly break down the tree into a rich nutrient that feeds the soil and helps new tree seeds to grow. Who's going to give us the information for the last box? Ooh, we got a new hand. Kellen. Tell us about it.
I couldn't remember.
You couldn't remember? Y'all want me to read it again? One more time? Okay. Through decomposition, it helps break down the tree into rich nutrients, and the nutrients feed the soil that new trees are growing in. So what should we say? What should we say, Clay?
So it's pretty much helping other trees
It's pretty much helping other trees by how?
by feeding them.
By feeding them. Did you get that? You with me, Kellen? By feeding them. So let's go back to our thing, to our form that we're filling out. All right, Clay said, are the trees alive or dead? Dead. So dead trees, they break down and they feed what? What's that N word? Nutrients. They help feed nutrients to other people. Other what? Other trees. That was awesome, Clay. That was awesome. He took what I was saying and he put it in his own words. That was awesome, Clay.
Can I interject?
You sure can.
Decomposition, what does that sound like? Something else in math that we know.
Decompose a 10.
Decomposing a 10. So when we're decomposing a 10, what are we doing to that 10? Breaking apart. It's the same thing with the tree. Decomposition is decomposing, it's breaking it apart, breaking the tree down. So you should be able to make those connections.
Thank you, Miss Davis.
You're welcome.
Everybody say great job, class.
Great job.
And I'm going to tell you why it's a great job. Because when I look back and I go back to my question, I think that I now have enough information. I have enough information to describe, or I have enough information to tell about the life cycle of a tree, because we got that covered. Check. I also have enough information to talk about how a tree is helpful to other trees when they die. So I'm going to give those a check mark too. And boys and girls, I'm doing this anytime I read a text. Anytime I read a text, I'm thinking about, what do I need to look for? What do I need to be aware of while I'm reading? And I'm making notes of that. You guys look like a third grade class, or when you get to third grade, you're gonna make a lot of notes. And those notes help us organize our thinking. So we'll start with you on the bottom. But I need somebody to tell us. Let's start from the top. We had our focus question, which told us to find a life cycle of trees and how they help other trees. Real quick, what was our first step? Somebody, what was our first step? What was our first step? Kaden.
Trees start out as a seed.
Starts out as a seed. Second step. Second step, I need a young lady. I need a young lady. Second step. Aubrey. That big word?
That's not word.
Germination.
Germination is when the seed cracks open and begins to grow.
Good job, Aubrey. The tree cracks open and begins to grow. Now I need a young man for the next step. What's the last step? Last step. Oh, I have not heard from Miles today.
I want different one. It turns into a sapling.
He said I wrote it differently. He did write it differently, but did he tell us the same information? He did. He just wrote it in his own words. It turns into a sapling. The last one, when we talk about how it helps it, everybody, how does the tree help another tree when it dies? The dead tree breaks down and gives nutrients. Give yourself a pat on the back. You just organized your thinking. So we are ready to go to that bottom part. And this is the part, boys and girls, where I'm going to need you to do some heavy lifting. Meaning I'm going to need you to do most of this without Dr. Richmond. Okay? You think you can do it? I don't know. I've heard everybody on this side say they can. Clay, I know you can do it. So let me start you out. Let's start you out. We have to talk about the life cycle of a tree. So I'm going to start out this is where I'm going to put it into a sentence, okay? Let's start out. The life cycle of a tree. The life cycle of a tree starts when, y'all just told me, starts when the seed is a, not seed, starts when the tree is a seed.
Can you zoom out just a little bit?
Now what?
Zoom out. The end is getting cut off.
Oh. Miss Davis to the rescue.
Voila.
So guess what I just did? I just used my first box of information. What can I do to that box? Can I mark it out? Let's mark this, give that one a check. I used that information. What word could I start my sentence with right here? I said first, starts with an N. What is it? Next. Next, the seed goes through, I'm going to back up a little bit. I want you to fill in the blank. Next, the seed goes through, don't say it, I want to see what everybody thinks. I'm going to come around and see what everybody picks to put in that blank. Just remember, we're on step number 2. I want to see what you put in that blank. Next, the seed goes through. I just saw it. I saw one. Next, the seed goes through. Next, the seed goes through what, everybody? Germination. Next, the seed goes through germination. Germination. Remember, germination's up here in my box if I need to find out how to spell it. What can I do with my second box? Check it out. It's done. It is done. Goes through germination. All right, let's keep rolling right along. Finally, the tree, and this is where I'm going to stop again. And I'm going to let you fill in that blank. Finally, the tree is blank. Finally, the tree is blank. All right, let's see what we got in that blank. I just saw it. Just saw it again. Just saw it the third time. And the fourth time. Sorry, my handwriting is not good. Saw it again. See it? Over there on that side. All right, so what I was getting all excited about was I saw people say that finally the tree is a what? It's a sapling. It's a sapling. It's a sapling. Finally, the tree is a sapling. All right, now here is where Dr. Richmond is going to totally step back. We said the last part is a tree helps other trees because it dies, it breaks down, it feeds nutrients to the soil and to the other tree. So I'm going to start you out and then I'm going to let you go. Dead trees Dead trees, do they get up and walk?
No.
No, what do they do? They help. Dead trees help. They help who? Other trees. How am I doing on time?
Stop it.
All right, I'm gonna stop you right there. And this is where the amazing second grade class is gonna finish it up. Dead trees help other trees by. This is where you're gonna do all the lifting. Dead trees help other trees by doing what? Good. Okay. You got that one? See where the final is at? Right here. Finally, Ms. Davis, you have got some super stars.
Yes, I do.
Smarties.
And for those of you who are wondering, well, where can I go to get this information? Remember, we've got our last box right there. And what I didn't do was check off my third box. So I've got my information right there. All right, everybody pause. Everybody look at me. Well, actually, don't look at me. Look at Aubrey. Aubrey, stand up. Aubrey's going to stand up. And I'm going to become Aubrey. And I'm going to say, here is Aubrey's whole answer. It says, the life cycle of a tree starts when there is a seed. Next, the seed goes through germination. Finally, the tree is a sapling. Dead trees help other trees by feeding nutrients to the other trees. Is that good? Give her a hand. Let's see, who am I going to be next? Who am I going to be next? I knew who I was going to be. I had it in my head. Oh, I'm going to be Kate Donahue. Stand up, Kate Donahue. All right, the life cycle of a tree starts when the tree is a seed. Next, the seed goes through germination. Finally, the tree is a sapling. Dead trees help other trees by feeding nutrients to the trees. What do you think? Thank you, Kate Donahue. Let's do one more. Who am I going to be next? Who should I be next? Look at Emma Mackey. She's sitting here all nicely. All right, stand up, Emma Mackey. All right, the life cycle of a tree starts when there is a seed. It goes through germination. Finally, the tree is a young tree. Dead trees help other trees by breaking down to feed them. Is that good? Thank you, Emma Mackey. Boys and girls, I hope that you learned something today. Ms. Davis, I'm sure you know we still have a few that are working, and we'll let you decide how far you want to go with that. But thank you, boys and girls.
What do you say? Thank
Now, would you recommend, what would you recommend to do with the paper?